truth, I have tried multiple times in earnest to find faith inside myself. And when I've failed, I can't help but ask the question, if there is a God, has he made me a non-believer on purpose? And if so, why? Has anyone ever asked that question? But why? Hello, it's Georgia, and I've actually ended this video at those of you out there who are believers, because it's really important to ask thoughts.
Hi, Georgia. You don't know me, but I'm a viewer of yours in Texas. I'm a chemistry professor. I'm also a Christian. I'm also with an organization called Ratio Christi, which is a group dedicated to making a rational defense for the Christian faith. And so you hit the nail on the head with this question, especially the target of this question to people who are religious and would like to make a case for the truthfulness of the Christian truth claims. I apologize for the quality of this video. I'm going to put it up as private and send you a link. I don't really think the quality of my setup here is going to be so great for open distribution, but you're asking a very genuine question, and I wanted to give you a genuine response. The reason I'm watching your channel is because I was watching various Jordan Peterson channels, and you came up on the suggested videos after that with your video of how Jordan Peterson changed my life. And then I was very interested because sort of the traditional views that you had really were in line with the Christian views that we teach in our churches. And yet I picked up that you weren't really coming at it from necessarily a religious point of view, but really just following the obvious facts. And I agree with you. And so I found it very intriguing just to sort of listen to your philosophy and follow a different path to kind of the same results that we have. But what I'm going to do in order to stick to the topic at hand, I'm going to play your video, and then I'm going to stop it occasionally when I think I have something to say. And you can, just like a fish, you can eat the meat and spit out the bones. You know, so if there's something that doesn't sit well, that's fine. But I think this is a very good question, and I think it'll be kind of a nice discussion, kind of a strange YouTube discussion that we can have nowadays with modern technology. So let's go on.
The background of the story is that I didn't believe in God until about my 13. I would have this nightly ritual where just before I went to bed, I would kneel at the end of my bed and do like the praise of the and close my eyes, and I would pray, and I would talk to day, I would talk to my fears and my hopes, and I remember feeling like a presence visiting, like I had no doubt this to me. But then something happened. I didn't pray for a while, and the next time I checked back in the faith department in my soul and everything, it was empty. Just, I don't know. And it's been empty ever since. I don't miss that feeling. I don't remember which rituals were helping for me. Most of the rituals say don't miss them. I don't know because I said them wrong, and I just got my father on. It's like to him the aspect of their life missing. I don't feel spiritual. I always felt connected to life through something that I don't know. Following that feeling again, I cannot really do anything. I can't really do anything. Because this feeling of connection just doesn't work. So there's no end. Sometimes it's so intense that I just have to laugh out loud and don't know. I've said quite a bit. Okay, that's an interesting point. We kind of covered two things. One was the internal feeling of the presence of God, or really, I think probably the Holy Spirit in our lives. And you know, there's a debate on whether children can feel that, but you obviously felt that. I obviously felt that when I was young as well. But being raised in the church, it was nurtured, and it grew and blossomed into something larger throughout my life. As I got older, it got
got to be more of a part of my life. But I think that that's something that many Christians will push, and sort of they sort of push this feeling aspect of their faith. But I think there's more to it than that. I don't think that your faith can be just an emotional feeling, because emotions fluctuate, and those that quote feel the presence of God on a daily basis will have a spiritual crisis on the morning they wake up and they don't feel that, or they go through a hard time and those feelings aren't there to carry them through. And so I think it's always been a problem for even Christians, strong Christians, to depend upon the feelings that they have as if that feeling was the sole substance of their faith. So I think that it's being missing is something that even Christians feel. There's times when you just kind of feel what they call a spiritual dryness or the hiddenness of God. And then you kind of get this swelling, like you just mentioned, when you see a beautiful sunset, or you hear an amazing musical piece, or you see the incredible skill in an artist, or read Shakespeare or some poetry that really moves you. There's something more to it than just words, something more to it than just the musical notes and the instruments. There's something deeper than just the vibrations of air and your eardrums. There really is sort of an argument from beauty, and there are many philosophers that will make that case. You can look up Peter Kreeft, Kreeft, and he has an argument from beauty. C.S. Lewis also has an argument from beauty. Basically, this longing in our soul seeks to be satisfied, just like hunger. If you're hungry, there's food. And so it's like hunger and food go together. There's the hunger and there's the satiation. Thirst and liquid water go together. But what is this hunger of the soul? It suggests that there's something that could satisfy that hunger for our souls. When we see something beautiful, we long for, like C.S. Lewis put it, a kingdom. You remember a kingdom you've never been to before. And so I think that's a beautiful picture for the kingdom of God. It's a kingdom you long for. And we see glimpses of it in beautiful music, poetry, sunsets, and the stars at night.
So that feeling was just a whole bunch of thoughts and emotions that are going through me that result in this feeling of just being deeply connected to life itself, but nothing to do with the higher power and being God. And I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that I'm atheist and spiritual and religious, mainly because acronym sounds like Spanish.
I think that that's one of the funny things. If someone says, "Well, I'm spiritual but not religious," well, of course, we're all spiritual. I believe that we were created with this longing into us to seek God. So we're all spiritual. Whether we're religious or not is the issue. But we're spiritual beings.
Sometimes I look at religious people and I get a tinge of envy because there is something that they have that I don't. And it seems to bring them comfort or joy or at least stability in their life.
I was really surprised by this because it's a very honest thing for you to say that you kind of recognize the stability, but more than that, just the peace that religion, I'm going to say specifically Christianity, because I don't want to just generalize this to religion. I can speak for my own faith as a Christian, that when Jesus comes to his disciples and he says, I bring you peace, not as the world brings peace, but my peace. This is probably the number one thing. We've been through trials, we've deaths in the family, all kinds of things. And throughout that, I felt a peace that the Bible describes, a peace beyond understanding. And it is the most rock solid thing that I've ever experienced. No matter how hard the world pressed down on me, the strength and the peace that I received from God in those times was equal to the task.
That I don't think I'll ever have. A few years ago, I tried really hard to believe. I went through a period in my life where I said, okay, if I'm going to convert, it is going to be now.
Mm.
I tried so many different things. I tried proof and disproof. I tried emotions. I tried to convince myself I'd be happier if I was a believer. I spoke to so many people about their faith and what it meant to them. And I even spoke to people who converted later in life as adults. But then half of it they described to becoming a person of faith. Just kind of amazing.
I understand this, and that's why I kind of worry about making this video. It's just going to be another person telling you their personal journey. But I want to focus on one thing that you just said that really triggered my thoughts, because as a Christian who tries to make a case for Christ, I think about how people come to believe in Christ a lot. And you can't make yourself believe something. You believe in stuff every day. You check the milk to see if it's spoiled, and you use evidence. You sniff it or whatever, but you make a decision based upon what you've seen. You've noticed certain facts, and you've assented to those facts being true, and then you put your trust in those facts by tasting the milk. But the point is, you can't force yourself to believe something emotionally or anything like that. You really can't have blind faith in anything. You're going to either trust people who tell you something. If you have a trustworthy person who says, here, taste this, and you trust that person, you know they have your best interest in mind, you're going to trust them, and you're going to taste whatever they give you. Or you're going to trust your own senses, or you're going to trust authorities. You're going to hear what an authority says, or maybe read something from a person you think is an authority. So you have all of these different things that you can trust, and even intuition. Sometimes, like it seems like a lot of the things you've covered so far are intuitions, feeling like the way you're made and the universe is made, that maybe that suggests there's a God out there. That's an intuition, and it's not devoid of perception. Okay, so you're trusting in something, and so I don't think you can make yourself believe in God, but you need to gather more facts. And so I think those three things: noticing new facts is the first case. Uh, Evaluating or assenting to those facts, are these really the truth of the matter? And then the last part is what we mean by believe, is actually taking a step of trust in the truthfulness of the facts that you have. And so that's what we mean by faith, is that last step of actually trusting in the truthfulness of the facts that you have.
In order to believe, I feel like I'd have to change who I am, and that's a pretty scary thing to do, really. I was actually having a discussion.
It's very scary. In fact, that's part of, even though I'm in an organization that if you want to use the term, evangelizes, I do it a very different way, because I recognize what you just pointed out, that it's a serious thing to present this information to somebody, because it will change their life. But we see that happen all of the time. I just finished reading a book by Nabil Qureshi, who was a Muslim who ended up meeting David Wood in college, and through their friendship, he was introduced to new facts about Jesus Christ, about his life, about his death on the cross, and so on. And as a Muslim, he had so many beliefs that he'd been taught about this situation, and David Wood was able to give him more evidence for the truthfulness of Jesus's life, for his death and resurrection, which Nabil just discounted completely. But then David Wood was able to provide so many facts. I recommend that book, just if nothing else. It's such an incredible read. And so it's the book's name is Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. I highly recommend it. If nothing else, it's such an interesting read to watch a young Muslim college student go through the life-changing search for the truth. And in there, you'll see a lot of the facts that convinced him. And so this video certainly is not going to be enough for you to trust in anything. And I'm just trying to provide some input and respond back to what I thought was really a direct question to people like me.
With a close friend of mine last night who happens to be very religious, and religion is a big part of their life, and it always has been. And I was trying to describe what it would be like for me to change my belief pattern, and just to try to explain to people who out there who imagine you yourself losing your faith and becoming an agnostic or an atheist and never believing in God again, losing all of that stuff in life to you, basically. So to qualify the step that I would have to go through to start believing, it would be the equivalent of someone who was a believer to become a non-believer. You can just imagine how big the change would be for you, and that is what I tried to do and
Yeah.
but I was unable.
Well, naturally, you can't do it because you can't force yourself to make that huge of a change by your own free will. You can't just say, okay, today I'm going to be a Christian and force myself to believe all of these things. You actually have to do some research into them if you're a thinking person and you're not sort of at your last grieving straw and just reaching out for God. There are people that will just make that change in an emotional crisis or a very difficult time. But my point is, when you're coming at this clear-headed, there's a fair amount of research that goes into it. I really suggest to look at the life of Jesus and get to know him, because he's the center pole in the tent of Christianity. And it all rests on what he did on the cross and whether or not he rose from the dead. It's a crazy claim for a naturalist, right? That you actually have to believe in the supernatural. But you look at the evidence behind the resurrection, and there's really no other explanation for the missing body, the brutality of the crucifixion. He was dead, and then he was put in a grave, and then the grave was empty, and then these disciples that fled for their lives 3 days later are spreading the word. And his mortal enemies, like Paul, who were stoning believers, all of a sudden become people who are preaching the story of Jesus and his resurrection. None of these facts fit unless something supernatural happened. So that's a teaser for you to kind of look into it, and that information is in that Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus book.
If you had any insight, because I'm making this video to see if I can change my mind about things.
Yeah.
I don't want to change my mind, but I don't not want to change my mind about religion. I'm completely neutral.
Perfect.
But any insight into your pathway would be very useful. So I hear very much.
Okay, my pathway. Now, a lot of people will say I was socially conditioned to be a Christian. I was raised in the church here in Texas, and then went off to a very secular school at the University of Texas. And I didn't leave the faith, but I started to look at it critically, because I thought, oh, there's all these religions out there. How do I know mine's the right one? And so I searched and really saw that many of the other religions were sort of man-made paths to reach God or make ourselves acceptable to God. And Christianity was totally different. Jesus' claim was that he was God come to earth. And it wasn't just Jesus. Isaiah, 1,000 years before Jesus, says that his name will be Emmanuel, which means God with us. So there's something so special about Jesus being God, coming down here to show us the way. And so as I did an intellectual look into my faith, I found that it held up. So it's not like I left the faith and came back, but I would have. And you just have to take my word for it. If I had looked into it and saw that it was totally lacking in any kind of merit, truthfulness, or intellectual rigor, then I would have been committed to seeking the truth over what made me feel good. And that's a difficult thing to claim, but you'll have to trust me on that one.
And I kept hearing this voice saying, Georgia, there is no faith in you, there is no God in you. perhaps it was me just not having the motivation to change because I was fearful of, containing how I am so much changing myself. And sometimes, probably once or twice in my life, all the moments that I've had in my life, I felt very weak, very broken, very exposed to this smallest thing, very sensitive, that feeling of loneliness. And for anyone who's truly been alone, it's one of the most awful feelings that you can have. Right? Those moments when you just feel so just sink into the knees and like what you thought, hiding this looking up as if you're looking towards the wishing there was someone else
Mhm. Mhm. I had those moments in college. I think many people do. Um, and I discovered an interesting thing. I would just stare at the telephone. This was before smartphones, obviously, and wish it to ring because I just depended upon my friends to kind of either keep me distracted or keep me entertained or what have you. And I would even call people and they would be busy, and I would just try to get away from this loneliness, like you speak of. And one time, I mean, I'm sitting there, I've exhausted all of the options, and I picked up the Bible and just read the Psalms, and it really calmed me down. Now, I'm not trying to give you a prescription of reading the Psalms. What I'm trying to tell you is there was something in reading the Bible that comforted me more than even prayer, like you say. That we joke, or I joke, and if you want to hear God speak, read the Bible out loud. I mean, that's the view that Christians have of the Bible. And yeah, there's a lot of confusing things in there, but if you read the Psalms, David was totally honest in those. He was crying out to God. He was angry. He was frustrated. He was bursting out in praise and thanksgiving. It's an emotional roller coaster. And I saw that I was on the same roller coaster that every other human was on. And the Psalms really gave me comfort. And also in college, when you're making a million decisions, the Proverbs were so full of wisdom that I was able to kind of, it was almost like reading the cheat codes in a game that you could sort of gain wisdom from Proverbs instead of from your own stupid mistakes. And I think that's what people are so attracted to by Jordan Peterson is he's giving a lot of wisdom from his many years of studying psychology and the ancient wisdom. And so this is something that I also discovered in college. Loneliness is so corrosive, but yet you can find comfort in prayer, but you can also find comfort in reading the Bible and reading Psalms particularly.
So, even in those incredibly emotionally vulnerable states, I couldn't even get close to changing and opening up. So, I don't know, I feel like I simply cannot believe.
Well, yeah, you couldn't force yourself to open up because the self-doubt is talking to you and talking you off the ledge, if you will. What are you doing talking to a God who doesn't exist? You don't believe in him. And so these internal voices can really be, you know, can be an enemy, if you will. So,
This is the conundrum that I'm talking about in the title. So, one of these two options must be correct about the ones that I'm never going to be able to prove either. Either there isn't a good or there is a good. And for some crazy reason,
well, before you say that you can't prove or disprove, it depends on what you think is proof. We have in our court system, and I'm sure Australia is very similar to Texas, we do not say you have to prove something beyond any doubt, even in the most egregious cases where we're going to take someone's life in capital punishment. Now, I realize we're kind of unique in that respect in the world and in the United States and certain states. But the point is, where's your level of proof? Because just the creation of the universe, we see the universe and time had a beginning. We see the fine tuning of the universe. The physical constants are tuned to 1 part in 10 to the 123rd power. I mean, it's so improbable that we would have the universe that we have, that it just really points to almost the fingerprints of God in the creation of our universe. Now, of course, don't get sidetracked in the inter-Christian debate about whether that was done in a short period of time or over billions of years. Personally, I think it was billions of years because that's what the evidence in physics shows us. But you see God's handiwork all over the place. And to me, it rises to the level at least of beyond a reasonable doubt that God's fingerprints are all over what we see. But you may have a different level of proof.
Reason, he has made it extremely difficult for me to believe that he exists. And I have no idea why.
I don't think he's made it difficult. I think our society, our rationalistic, materialistic society, in our education system, they don't want to teach any particular religion. Well, I don't exactly know what the grade schools are like in Australia, but here they think they're being neutral by totally ignoring the religious aspects of these things, when that's actually taking a position. That's trying to explain everything about life without reference to anything spiritual. And that's a position. And it makes it difficult for us to hear a different story. And so I think that's more of what you're struggling with, if I can be so bold. And I don't think God made it that difficult for you. I think it's just this culture that we're in has made it very difficult for us.
It's supposed to be a challenge, or perhaps he actually hasn't made me like this and I've just chosen this, and this is the way it's going to be. I mean, really, it's kind of relevant. If you're a noticing being, would you really care if people believed in you? Because if I was a God, I'd just be walking around loving it, just 24/7, just asking for the love that I have for everything. And I imagine that's the feeling that you get when you sort of lay eyes on the first child.
I'm sure it is. My wife and I have children, and you are so right. I've never loved anything more deeply, more completely than my children, my wife, my family. I never really considered myself capable of violence until I loved something that much, and I thought there was nothing I wouldn't do to protect them, to keep them from harm. And so you're totally right. And I think God does have that love for us. The Christian story in general is that it started out with this basking in the love of the Creator and the created, and that was harmed on our end, that we rebelled and introduced into ourselves a defect of our own rebellion. And the story of history written out in the scriptures is God's plan to rescue us from our own selves, to come here and pay the penalty on our behalf that we could not pay for ourselves, and to make things right again. The issue for eternity then is whether we're able to come underneath the umbrella of what Jesus did on the cross. The story is that God is holy and we're not. But if we come under Christ's holiness and accept his payment for our blemishes, our rebellion, our sin, that now we are back in a compatible relationship of love with God, and he can love us and we can love him the way we were meant to.
What is it to believe? What does it consist of to be valid? Is it actually that belief from in here as an individual that there is a higher power? Or is it, as Jordan Peterson says, just acting in life?
I think it's more internal than just acting, because when you're acting, you're just acting. But it's not all at once necessarily. It's that threefold thing of noticing new facts. I think the first place to start is what happened in history surrounding Jesus' death on the cross. and what happened right after that with the resurrection, because that's the pivotal event of all of history. And I've, I've got several blogs that I can share with you and so on, but I'm going to leave that there uh, for you to respond back if you're interested, and then I can give you some resources. I don't want to throw everything into this video because it would be too long. But it's a piece at a time. It's noticing a new fact, being convinced that it's true, and then trusting in it enough to go and look for another fact, and then assessing if that's true, and then putting trust in the truthfulness of that fact, and then getting another one. And so it's just a path of seeking the truth.
As if there is a God, or is it describing yourself as a Christian also? Because I suppose if it's just acting as if there is a God, or just describing yourself as religious, anybody could do that.
Yeah.
I can certainly do that. I could describe myself as Christian and go about my life acting as if there is a Christian God.
I think eventually that would blow up. Maybe. Some people say fake it till you make it. I don't believe that. I don't believe that you can be genuine. And I think you will certainly see through your facade, and you'll be afraid that others will see through your facade as well. And it's going to be a miserable life. So I know that that's what Jordan Peterson says he does. He behaves as if there's a God. Um, but I think when it gets on those topics, you can see his wheels are turning. And honestly, I pray for him. I pray that um, those wheels will keep turning, and that he'll put fact upon fact upon fact, and he'll realize that it's not just something you do, it's something that's true.
Everyone else around me is none the wiser, except for the God, of course.
Yeah.
But if belief is having that psychological feeling, I just cannot say that I believe. But I'll throw it back to you. What do you think consists of being a believer? What would you accept as being a believer? Or is it about being accepted by God?
I think that's the key, and he tells us in Romans. So if you wanted to pick a book that would lay it all out for you, this is what the Apostle Paul wrote near the end of his life when he was trying to sum it all up. And he wrote this book called Romans. It was to the Roman Christians, the Christians in Rome. And he talks about what it means to be a believer and how we're made right with God through Jesus Christ. And it's an interesting book to read. I think it will lay it out. If you want to know who Jesus is, of course, you can read any of the first 4 books of what we call the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. John was written last and really covers this sort of spiritual side of Jesus and his claims to be God here on earth. I think it's 21 chapters. It's very short, but you'll really see Jesus' love for his disciples. And if you want to read more about his teachings, Matthew is good. I think Matthew 5, 6, and 7 are what we call the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus deals with legalism, trying to obey the rules, and he makes the rules so strict to kind of show that we can't live a life of just following rules. We really have to trust in him to make up the difference, if you will, to rescue us from our own sin. So what I would consider a believer is someone who recognizes in themselves this defect. No matter what your good intentions are, you fall short. You fall short intentionally. You lie. You scheme. You do things that you shouldn't do. And if God is perfect and we're not, we can't be in his presence. I mean, it's like darkness trying to get back into a candle flame. When the light is lit on a candle flame, darkness flees. It's just the way it is. If we have darkness in us, we're gone from God's presence. And so we need to be able to be covered. And so a Christian is one who's recognized their own defect, their own darkness, and asks Christ to come and paint that over with his sacrifice on the cross. That's why Christians talk so much about the blood of Christ. It was really the blood that he shed on the cross. And it kind of figures in all of the sacrifices that God told the Jewish nation to make in the Old Testament. We can go into that a lot more in depth. But it's a Christian who is ask God to cover them, to repair them, to make them holy again so they can believe in Him, they can be in His presence forever, that they can have His peace here on earth, that they can grow in Him and be a follower of Christ. If someone's a follower of Christ, they're not someone who just does this for fire insurance. They're someone who wants to know Jesus and to do the right thing and to love others as Christ loved us. That's a believer.
I don't know. And how do you arrive at such a mindset? And if you think that there are people who are non-believers, and there are, why is that so?
I don't know. I think our rationalist society, our materialist society, comes and snatches away people's minds and distracts them. Other religions, a man kind of making his own way. There's lots of possibilities, I guess, and it's so difficult to answer the why questions. We all have them, but if someone's giving you easy answers for the why questions, you better ask more people, because no one knows all of these why questions.
There is a God. Why are there people who do not believe? And even when they try, cannot, like me. And I apologise, this wasn't exactly a philosophical discussion like the title may have suggested, but I just wanted to sort of get my broad thoughts out because it's something that I've thought about for a while. That we come out of also as a God, He does create people who do not believe in Him, and probably never will. So it's just, is there a purpose behind that?
Yeah, that is an odd thing. I don't know. Again, it's a why question. Especially questions that are why God or why did God. Those are so hard to answer, but yet we all think them. And I'm not sure. I don't know.
What is the point of it? Is it because that God knows that I be happier as a non-believer? Is there a purpose for me to not believe in a God? Is it going to be a silly beginning from I don't know? As an end point, I have the last exam last Sunday, which was a Wednesday, which is a realistic exam. But I'm pretty sure I failed the exam. I walked out extremely stressed and screwed. And it meant that I have the next 3 months of my life, all my evenings, all my weekends, studying and not doing anything but studying.
Sounds like you're in graduate school. And so I'll pray for you, for your exam, and for your peace of mind, and for your ability to dig yourself out of a hole if you have dug yourself into a hole. It is such a stressful time to study so hard and to put everything onto an oral exam or a presentation or something like that. And so I don't know exactly what your situation is, but these times are so stressful, but they produce in us a strength of character that is really unavailable in any other way. And so I think that may even be part of this too. Why are you having such a difficult time? Well, I believe that when you resolve this question, of course, I pray that you will dig deep and find the facts that I've found on the resurrection of Christ and the purposes therein, so that this will be a grand story for you in your own heart, and that you will remember the path through the valleys and the trees and forests, and you can think, wow, what a great outcome, and what a great struggle that was. It made me a sensitive person to other people who are struggling, and that maybe God will use that in other people's lives.
Study at work. I make YouTube videos, so there you go, but that's mainly because I couldn't do socializing any justice, so I started the YouTube channel 3 months ago now. But I remember thinking, having dinner that night on the 11th, that I don't really care if I fail the exam, because that day, a few years ago, 10,000 men died. I think the statistic was that 10,000 men died every day for a long time. I just thought, here I am, with the luxury of worrying about how to pass an exam instead of dying and losing whatever His grace. So
I think it's so great that you're not putting your whole life and identity into your degree or to your exam or to your academic success. Those things, I guess that works for a short period of time, but eventually it rings hollow. And it's not enough to base your identity on. And so my thing is, a lot of the secular philosophy is about identity and what you put your identity in. And does society identify or provide our roles that we're supposed to fulfill? To some degree, some would say yes, but I think it's a much better prospect to find your identity in your creator, because again, the purpose of a creation is given to it by the creator. And so finding your life purpose and identity in relationship to your creator is a deeper and much more fulfilling relationship than a career, mother, wife, sister. Those things are parts of who make us, but God made us into all of those roles and can feed a richness into our identity that we can't get from any other role or any other accomplishment or even a soldier or nationality, wealth. None of those things are big enough to put our identity in. So I share your awe for those who sacrificed everything for during those wars. It's mind-boggling.
I think that is a good way to end this video on a positive note. And for those of you that have not watched Peter Jackson's They Shall Not Grow Old movie, which brings to life in colour the old videos from number one, highly recommended. It's super and emotionally intelligent to watch that movie.
I'll check it out. Thanks. And hopefully this came across nicely. And you're not freaked out by this random message from some chemistry professor in Texas. So I think you asked a good question, and I would encourage you to keep seeking. One of the most bold statements that Jesus Christ made to his disciples was the statement of his statement of, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And he said, no one comes to the Father but through me. And most people get stuck on that. But his claim to be the truth is a very important claim. And you can treat it as an if-then. If he was right and you just seek the truth, then seeking the truth will lead you to him. You don't have to worry about where this is going to lead. Keep looking for new facts. Keep evaluating whether they're true. And when you find true facts, you can trust them. And I'm here to help you, and others are too. Reach out by email or comments on YouTube, etc. And so I wish you the best.